Good afternoon. It's an honor to be able to speak to you today at this IDAHOBIT conference. Thank you to Adam M for making my job easy. I'm here representing an LGBTIQ advocacy group called Keshet, which means rainbow in English. As a member of the Jewish Community Council of Victoria, our primary goal is to help nurture, protect, and provide a safe environment for queer Jews, both children and adults. So I want to preface my speech by explaining that I'm not particularly religious. I'm Jewish, yes, but not religious. I identify as a humanist Jew, which means I express my religion through the cultural and historical experience of the Jewish people rather than in a theistic context. I'm not the most knowledgeable of Jewish law, halakha, so don't worry, I won't bombard you with rabbinical commentary. However, I've had a 12-year Jewish education, so there will be a few Hebrew phrases sprinkled here and there, which I'll translate for your convenience. So let's begin by examining some phrases from the Torah, the Jewish Bible, that speak about homosexuality. Vayikra, Leviticus 18:22. Do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. It is an abhorrence. Vayikra, Leviticus 20:13. If a man lies with a male as one lies with a woman, the two of them have done an abhorrent thing. They shall be put to death. Their blood guilt is upon them. In Judaism, acting in a homosexual manner is classed as a to'eva, an abhorrent and prohibited thing punishable by death. Luckily, the Jewish tribunal, the Sanhedrin, doesn't exist anymore, so there's technically no one to apply this death penalty. Anyway, while the Torah may forbid the homosexual act, it says nothing about the homosexual state of being or personal inclination. In other words, you can be gay as long as you don't act upon it, so that's something, I guess. Know that your thoughts are taboo and your state is an affliction. And for goodness sake, never express your same-sex love with another human. Then you will be a good person. That sounds healthy. As a teen, I never saw a reason to know the specifics of why I was an abomination. Knowing that I was one in a vague sense was enough to push me away. According to Judaism, once a Jew, always a Jew, even if you lapse. That's comforting in a way. It's partly why I've held on to my religion after all of this time, even while knowing what the scripture taught my community to believe. The fire and brimstone outlook on homosexuality is but a fleeting memory for me in 2018. Still, like all memories, this one lingers on. Today I would like to open my Pandora's box and share with you some stories of how my younger self chose to deal with his identity crisis. I would like to explore how these experiences shaped me into the resilient and proud person you see today. How does one cope with this inherent contradiction, you may ask? I coped at various times in my life by denying my gayness or denying my Jewishness. I survived by feeling my way through the darkness without a torch and without a prayer. I ended up in a place that feels a little bit like home. I dare say I'm even happy. It's been a long road to get here, but my story begins many years ago. People always ask when I knew I was gay. Well, officially it was when I was 12, around puberty age, but looking back, there were signs before I even knew what being gay was. It was subtle at first. Having a warm, fuzzy feeling when seeing certain characters on TV, listening to boys talk about girls and having nothing to say, just feeling different. But it would only grow stronger through primary school. My support networks, with the best of intentions, would always reinforce the heteronormative lifestyle. You're such a handsome young man. You're going to make a girl very happy someday. The world was my metaphorical oyster, but I was a Jew. Something that seemed so easy for everybody else came so hard to me. I just wasn't interested in girls. I liked boys. It left me feeling very confused. Why would I have such strong feelings towards something that was not right? I didn't have the words for it at the time, for what these feelings meant. I just knew they were not okay, and I had to push them deep down. For me, desire and disgust became inherently jumbled up. That dichotomy would stay with me for some time, would stay with me and affect my ability to be intimate for some time. So let's go back to when I was 12, when I knew for sure I was gay. You can imagine how I worked it out. In that moment, I reached a level of physical and mental stimulation I had never experienced before. Euphoric. And then it went away, replaced by panic. A deafening silence filled the room. I felt as if I were recovering from a drunken stupor, only to find a knife in my hand and a corpse on the floor. I was terrified. I was ashamed. I was so angry at God for doing this to me. I was even more angry for doing this to myself, giving in to temptation. How could God love someone like me? I knew that I would never find happiness, and I wondered if I even deserved happiness. I was a walking avera, a walking sin. All I wanted was to be a good person, a good Jew. And as I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, through tear-stained eyes, I saw that goal slowly slip away. I remember in high school waking up each day and not wanting to move. I was that thing you heard about in whispers, something that existed, but something you could never be, not you, a faggot. And that's not a nice word, but you have to understand that's how I saw myself at the time. Before I realized I was gay, I was a homophobe. And now I was a homophobic homosexual, a self-hating gay. I was guilt-ridden because I knew if I had turned out straight, I would have hated someone like me. That hurt the most. I tried to say the words, "I am gay," and it made me want to vomit. It took a long time before I could even say those 3 words with some level of pride. So I survived by basically keeping it a secret on a need-to-know basis, and nobody needed to know. I remember seeing straight people in relationships, holding hands and giving each other eye contact across a room. And it would send a pang into my heart each time because I just knew that I'd never be able to have that. All my life I had watched Disney animated fairy tales. I knew the score. The guy ended up with the girl, and 2 princes never got a happily ever after. I had no gay role models. I was alone. I did everything I could to hide it. I lowered my voice, I watched my gait, I harshened my gay lisp. I made these sacrifices because I believed I had to play it straight in order to be a normal, happy, and good person. Nowadays I realize I can be all of those things and gay at the same time. For me, being closeted was a constant performance that you had to play perfectly, because the whole world was watching and waiting for you to slip up. I remember when people would ask me questions, "Jarod, do you have a girlfriend?" The deafening siren would go off inside my head, and the countdown would begin. I would offer a smile, while my brain began to overheat, processing a million thoughts in less than a second. No, I do not have a girlfriend. Technically correct, while vague enough to offer plausible deniability. Perfect. So in my early teens, I learned how to lie and betray my true thoughts while pretending it wasn't tearing me up inside. It was a useful skill. Convoluted and detrimental, perhaps, but the only solution that seemed to make sense. Once they knew I'd have to face their pity, disgust, disappointment, I was afraid. if I'd gotten out of my own head and realized, and I saw the beauty of who I was, rather than constantly wishing I'd worn someone else's skin, it would have been easier for me. But it's the life I led, and I believe the struggles made me stronger. People often ask how my parents took the news. Okay, it's not my proudest moment. I didn't exactly tell them. I'll just say that at the time I was 15 and I didn't know how internet history worked. Well, you can guess the rest. My mum likes to say she cried for 2 days, each day in mourning. She feared letting go of her dreams of me becoming a father and her a grandmother, which is only fair because the first mitzvah, commandment, in the Torah is to be fruitful and multiply. She also worried about the difficulty of my journey ahead. She's fine now and has been incredibly supportive of me. Dad almost suffocated me with a big hug when he found out. I think he helped Mum through it, and me. He's a good guy. I tried to become more religious in year 10, hoping to find answers by devoting myself to scripture. At the time, all I saw was my inability to be both gay and Jewish, and I had to make a choice. I chose to bury my nature, resign myself to a loveless life, and sink deeper and deeper into Wonderland, but to no avail. Vayikra, Leviticus 18:22, Vayikra, Leviticus 20:13. I felt bits of myself disappearing like the Cheshire cat. It all sounded like Jabberwocky to me. I had to escape. I survived for 2 more years, barely avoiding a mental breakdown, before graduating in 2011. I had to write an essay about homosexuality for my Year 12 Religion and Life exam, about how it was on par with kleptomania, as an affliction one is morally responsible for that must be overcome. I wrote with one hand and quietly sobbed into the other. After graduation, I turned my back on Judaism. I dated non-Jewish people. I didn't go to shul, synagogue. I existed by limply pushing against the proverbial brick wall after I hit it each day. I dated one closeted guy and we became very close, until he explained that the only way it would work was if I became his secret lover while he lived the straight life. Either that, or we would each marry half of a lesbian couple and live in a 4-person house. Okay, so you may laugh, but at the time, it was the life he felt he had to lead. The only way out of this mess. Not me. I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. Needless to say, we broke up soon after that revelation, and I knew time was running out, and there was only one thing I could do to prevent me from befalling the same fate as that poor man: coming out. So in 2013, I went to the Perth Gay Pride Parade as part of the contingent of humanist Jewish allies. It was the first Jewish thing I'd done in over a year. I was desperate to go, and it was nice to be able to blend in as an ally. I saw people with such happiness and freedom, dancing, singing, not a single one ashamed of who they were. I wanted that. I needed it. I looked around. The Jewish contingent was holding signs and marching right alongside them. In that moment, I felt it was possible to be accepted for being both Jewish and gay, but I couldn't bring myself to confess. I came out on Facebook a week or so later. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done. I chose Facebook so everyone would know at the same time. No gossiping, no talking behind my back. It prevented anyone from reacting badly for fear of how the group would respond. It's much harder to punch someone on a crowded street and get away with it, even if you really want to. Most comments were simply supportive with an air of apathy, in a sense of, oh, that's nice, which was strangely upsetting. You see, my whole life had led up to this moment. I'd spent 7 years imagining all the ways I would come out. By this point, I was hiding it, almost because nothing warranted me revealing such a huge secret. Like if Kim Kardashian was asked by local no one cares student paper if she was pregnant. So, keeping a lifelong secret one day to having the whole world know the next is an overwhelming change. And you kind of expect an overwhelming response. It felt anticlimactic, but you can't have everything. People often ask me, when did you come out? Ideally, I'd like to answer, Facebook. But as you soon learn, coming out is never just a moment. It's an ongoing process that happens every time you meet a new group of people who assume you're straight. I have to decide whether or not to tell them on the spot, or wait to correct them, or just not mention it. It's a whole thing. If you're queer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And telling people is itself a whole ordeal. I sometimes don't have the strength to come out all over again, to be interrogated. There's this look people give you. What is it? Surprise? Anger? No, concern. Their eyes say, oh dear, life is going to be a bit harder for you. Then the questions start rolling in. I have mental palm cards these days. When did you know? Card number 2. What did your parents think? Card number 5. It's as if you informing them of this fact gives them the right to become investigative journalists all of a sudden. Is this too personal? You don't have to respond. Well, yes it is, but you've put me in an awkward position now where I feel I'm obligated to respond. Okay, childhood trauma, time to relive you again. And once they know you're gay, that suddenly becomes your defining character trait. Gay Jarod. Maybe not said, but certainly thought. I've had all of these experiences from members of the Jewish community. It's one tedious aspect of being gay, but it doesn't take away the joys I've gained from it too. So I came out on Facebook, and it was fine. And 5 years later, I'm here on the other side of the country, living out a new stage of life. I chose to move to Caulfield, part of the Jewish epicenter of Melbourne. I wanted to embrace my religion, give it another go, but as a humanist Jew this time round. It's a long road I've taken to get here, and the road may have finished, but I've arrived at the base of a mountain I must climb. Here I've made many friends across the Jewish spectrum, from irreligious to quite religious indeed. I have friends who told me straight up they would, or did, vote no in the plebiscite, and I've remained friends with them. Some would call me crazy to stick to those who tried to deny me my human rights, but I guess if you were in my position, you'd do the same thing. I may strongly disagree with them, but a part of me understands where they're coming from. Because I know what the scripture says, and I know they only follow the scripture because they want to be good Jews. Once upon a time, I wanted to be a good Jew too. And I remember how I felt about gays before discovering I was one. So we ignore that little thing and embrace our similarities, and we make it work. My gay friends ask why I knowingly walk into the battlefield every day, why I stand in front of the firing squad each time I embrace my Judaism as a proud gay man. That's a fair question. The subtext of every Jewish experience, no matter how joyful, is that there are just some things I'll always be barred from, and there are minds I'll never be able to change. Homophobia is a fickle mistress. Though never explicitly uttered or heard, my second-class citizenship is always implied. Vayikra Leviticus 18:22, Vayikra Leviticus 20:13. This takes a toll on me, even after all this time. I won't pretend like it's perfect. I built up a lot of internalized hate in my early teens, and that doesn't just go away. I could only be intimate after first prying apart desire and disgust in my head. Now and again, there's still that little voice I have to fight against, but I'm in a much better place now than I was 12 years ago, that's for sure. So here in Melbourne, I've found safe spaces where I don't have to justify or rationalize or second guess. I joined JUMOs, which is a gay social support group right here in Melbourne for young Jews. We went to see the queer Jewish film, The Cake Maker, and it felt like home. We've had 2 Shabbos, Sabbath dinners together, and it felt like family. So there are moments I love being gay, and there are moments I wonder whether life would have been easier had it gone another way. But this is what I've got, so I might as well make the most of it. Last year, I stepped foot into shul for the first time in 5 years. I've celebrated a bunch of festivals with the local community. Culture, I can do. I recently went to a shiur, a roundtable discussion, on Jews being the chosen people, and I felt really uncomfortable. Religious studies, maybe not for me. Oh, I do have to remember to be on my A game when around the more religious communities, because as gay Jarod, I need to represent all of us. So far it seems to be going well. So what does IDAHOBIT Day mean to me? It's a day I wish I'd had growing up, allowing people from diverse backgrounds to share their stories. Being gay can be a solitary experience, so it's comforting to see an auditorium nodding their heads in agreement in a that happened to me too kind of way. In addition, I believe LGBTIQ inclusion within community health is imperative in helping all queer people believe we are good enough and deserve to live our true life with the love of our life. It would show that we don't need to be brave or special or an activist. We can simply be. That's enough. I have had my struggles with anxiety and depression. Believing you're inherently a sinner because of your sexuality is damaging to the human psyche. Support networks are supposed to be there to, well, support you. So when they turn on you, it can be devastating. The irony is that Jews know what victimization feels like better than anyone. Though the memories wane, the aftershocks remain. I've stuffed all those memories into my Pandora's box and closed the lid. But once in a while, something like this speech comes along and invites me to take one more peek inside. Every time, I process it a little bit more and I heal. The future looks brighter than ever before, and I'm excited to see what tomorrow holds. I am Jarod. I am Jewish. I am gay. I am fine just the way I am. If God exists, I am just the way He made me. My mom always used to say, I hope you marry a nice Jewish girl. Now she says, I hope you marry a nice Jewish boy. That I can do. So if my mum were here, she'd be asking you all if you knew anyone for me. Luckily she isn't, so you're safe. I want to leave you with a thought. There are people in my community right now, suffering, fighting against their nature, trying to make God happy. They contort and distort until they're unrecognizable. Nothing but an empty shell. Glazed eyes, a plastic smile, going through the motions. Underneath, constant fear, and praying that tomorrow those feelings will disappear. My advice? It's not worth it. It's not. You only live one life, one short, simple life, and then you're gone. Why waste a single second trying to be someone else for someone else's sake?